All right, so we've got a little problem with Ethan's truck. It's a 1998 Chevy K1500. The fuel gauge is erratic. It bounces all over the place. It doesn't stay still. Something's wrong with it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take this dash apart and see if we can get it working correctly. So first thing we're gonna do is we got to pull the dash apart, and then we'll pull out the gauge cluster, and then we'll go from there and see what we can come. All right, okay, so what we did is we take that dash apart, and this is the fuel gauge. This is where the needle goes on, this tiny little part right there, and it spins. It spins somewhat freely, and the only thing holding this in is two little screws right here. One screw here, one screw here. You take that off and this comes loose. These 4 pins, there's electrical connection that goes on to that when you push that in to the gauge cluster, that's how it gets its power. But this right here is the most important thing. So what we're going to do is I've got some spray lubricant. I got this at Real King. We're going to give this a try because I know that once you spray this on electrical connections and such, it's a waterproofer, but also at the same time it doesn't leave an oily residue, and that's what we want to prevent, especially dealing with electrical component like this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to douse this down really good. Just spray this all down in there, and we're going to work this little needle, spin it just like a little drive motor. I don't even know what you call this thing, like a drive motor. Anyhow, we're just going to get it freed up. Spray some more down in there, and then probably most importantly is just work it both directions. It does have some play in and out, but just work it, spin it, and it sure does work a lot better now. It definitely spins a lot better. So most importantly, we're going to let this dry out and knock out any fluid. That silicone will actually stay in there and actually lube this up. This silicone spray is good for many things. A lot of door hinges. You can actually use it on your rubber trim around your automobile. It actually works really good for waterproofing leather boots. It's phenomenal, especially if you have a pair that's not waterproof and you want to reapply. You can actually spray this on clothing, jackets, you name it. It'll actually make whatever you have waterproof. So we'll give this a try and see what happens. Okay, so everything is working good. The fuel gauge is now, when you turn the key on, it stays exactly where it's supposed to be. Before, it would jump, even when the key on, sitting still, just jump all over the place. When you're driving, it'd jump all over the place. So that silicone spray seems to fix the problem. Everything seems to be working right. Something to remember, when you pull each one of your needles off, you need to look at where they're at. And we did that. We took a picture of that with our phone, and then we put them exactly right back to where they were with the dash unplugged. Now, one thing that wasn't right was the speedometer was off. So what we did is we just got back. As you can see, we've got the lens cover off of the gauge cluster, and what we did was use our smartphone. And on this, we've got an app that tells your speed. So we drove down the road to get our speed on our GPS, and we left this needle off. So we held 20 miles an hour, and we put this, when we knew we was running 20, we then put this needle on the 20 and barely pushed it in. Then we dropped down to 10 miles an hour, and everything was perfect. We went up to 30 miles an hour with our GPS, and it's reading correctly. So even though this is all the way down on this little stud, like your tack is, it wasn't reading correctly. So you may have to use your GPS app on a phone to get your exact speed. And then one other thing we did is we checked our temperature on our engine to make sure that the temperature gauge was working, and we got the temperature right off the thermostat housing. That's where you're going to be. If you have a 180 degree thermostat, when that opens up, that should be reading 180 degrees, depending upon where your sensor is in your block. So everything's working good, and we're going to put this thing back together. And if you guys are having the same problem out there, shoot that little motor with a little silicone spray. And also probably all of these gauges have the exact same, what I call like a drive motor on them. They're all the same. So if you have an oil gauge it's flickering, a temperature gauge flickering, or even an amp gauge flickering, try doing what we did, spray that on there and put it back together and see what happens. You can also check your volt gauge with the engine running. You can put your multimeter on your battery to see what your alternator is putting out, and then this gauge should be pointing to exactly what your alternator is putting out. We did make a slight correction on that. Our alternator is putting out 14.1. We put it at 14 volts, and everything's working good. So I hope this works and helps anybody else that's having the same problem. And if you guys got any comments, put it down below. And like, share, and subscribe.